إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So this is our fourth lesson on the explanation of Nawaqid al-Islam, Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab rahimahullah. And in the previous lesson we were looking at the comments, the explanation of Shaykh Ubayd al-Jabiri, حفظه ta'ala. And in that previous lesson we discussed the meaning of the Deen of Islam. The meaning of the Deen of Islam, what does it mean when we say or speak of Islam as a religion, and how it is the religion of all the prophets and messengers, and how there is no such thing as the divinely revealed religions in the plural, because there is only one religion, it is the Deen of Islam. And as for what is known as Yahudiya or Nasraniya, these are contrived, fabricated religions invented by the people, deviating away from the message of the prophets. So the Shaykh spoke about that in light of some of the texts that he cited, and we also looked at what the various prophets and messengers, what they were agreed upon, and they were agreed upon calling to Tawheed and warning from Shirk, and that was the foundation. Even if in terms of the legislation that they brought there might have been variations and differences. We also finished by looking at the point that the Shaykh mentioned about how there are some people who try to belittle the affair of Tawheed, and they have certain slogans and statements such as, they say, Tawheed is already known, it's understood, we already know it, we understand it. Or they say that there are other issues that we need to discuss, we understand Tawheed. Or they say, how can you stick to the peel, and leave the essence, which is in the middle? So they basically sideline Tawheed in this manner. And the Shaykh mentioned that such people are either ignoramuses or they are misguided people of desires. So that concluded the previous lesson. So we start today in our fourth lesson, moving on to the second issue now that the Shaykh discusses. And this is the question, what is intended by Nawaqid al-Islam? That when we say Nawaqid al-Islam, keeping in mind that in the previous lessons we've defined what is meant by Nawaqid, what is a Naqid, and we've defined what is meant by Islam. So the Shaykh has already made that very clear. So now the second mas'ala, the second issue, is what is meant or what is intended by Nawaqid al-Islam. Nawaqid al-Islam. So the Shaykh says the Nawaqid of Islam, the nullifies of Islam, or the invalidators of Islam, to put it in English, is everything which moves a person who falls into it from the millah, from the deen that he is upon, to a millah of kufr. So a naqid, or the nawaqid of Islam, are all of those affairs which, if a person was to fall into them, they would remove him from the millah of Islam to the millah of kufr. So this is what we mean by Nawaqidul Islam. And this is what is known as tabdeelud deen, when a person alters his religion. And this is irrespective of whether this naqid is a statement that he makes, or a belief that he holds, or an action that he performs. Right? So the Nawaqid are all of those beliefs all of those statements, all of those actions, which if a person was to fall into them, they would transfer him or take him out of the millah of Islam to the millah of kufr. And so this is what we mean when we say Nawaqid al-Islam. And so this is what is intended in the texts when it says, when it mentions Tabdilud Deen, Man baddala deenahu, to the end of the hadith, the one who alters his religion. This now is an alteration of religion, because you've altered the Islam that you were upon to this kufr by way of the belief that you held, by way of the statement that you expressed, or by way of the action that you performed. So once we understand what is meant by Nawaqid al-Islam, the nullifies of Islam, then we need to understand that those who are upon disbelief are of two categories. All of those who are upon disbelief are of two categories. The first is what we call kafir asli, the original, the one who is originally upon disbelief, meaning to begin with, he has never had any connection with Islam. So this would be, for example, the Yahudi, Nasrani, Majusi, those people who have not entered into Islam to begin with at all. And likewise, every person who has not responded to the call of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is what we mean by kafir asli. His kufr is, it's original. It was there first. The second, and this is the important thing to understand, and the issues that follow on from this, is the kafir murtad. Kafir murtad. This now is the kafir who has become a kafir on account of turning back on his deen, or making tabdeel of his deen. And he is the one who has departed or removed himself from the fold of Islam. Now, the scholars discuss an issue when this person, when he has fallen into that which is a nullifier, meaning he expresses a belief, he expresses some words, he performs an action, and he does so with knowledge, meaning he knew, and he did so with qasd, meaning that he desired the action that he fell into, meaning he wasn't someone who did it by mistake, or he was out of his mind, or things of that nature, but he intended the action that he fell into, as opposed to being compelled or forced or unaware or things of that nature. So when these conditions are fulfilled, this person now leaves the fold of Islam. Now there's a question that the scholars discuss, in which the Shaykh mentions, is that after falling into irtidad, into ridda, if he then expressed the shahada, does that now bring him back into the fold of Islam? Just by expressing the shahada. And the Shaykh says that what is correct in this issue is no. This would not enter him into Islam. Why? Because in order for him to return to Islam, he would have to free himself from the thing which expelled him from Islam. And he would have to announce his innocence from that thing by which he left Islam. And so therefore, just the fact that he says Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, this is not sufficient to reaffirm his Islam. Rather, the shahada itself is something that only benefits who? The kafir asli. The kafir asli, meaning the one who has never entered Islam to begin with, like the Yahudi or the Nasrani or the Majusi, and anyone who hasn't responded to the call of the Messenger ﷺ, the shahada only benefits that person. That person, he says the shahada, he therefore enters into Islam, and then he then follows it up with the various other symbols of Islam, like the prayer, the fasting, the hajj, the zakah, and so on and so forth. It's only this person who benefits from the shahadatain. As for the kafir murtad, then he can say the shahada as much as he wants. he will only become, his Islam will only be affirmed if he frees himself from that by which he left Islam. And so this is the basis upon which we see that there are certain individuals we can give examples of. For example, Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, for example. These are individuals whom the scholars declared to be apostates, kuffar, because they left Islam on account of statements that they made, of views that they held, opinions that they held, that necessitated their disbelief. And so if they came and they said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that would not be accepted from them up until they renounce the belief or the statement or the action which caused them to leave Islam. And so this is basically the point or the principle that the Shaykh is putting across here, that the kafir murtad, the mere shahada is not sufficient for to affirm his re-entry into Islam, unless and until he disavows himself, for example, from Ba'athism, from Arab socialism and things of that nature, or from things which they wrote and which they affirmed and which they ruled by in opposition to what Allah revealed, and claiming that to be truth and justice and so on and so forth, and better and superior and whatever else, whatever other statements might have necessitated or beliefs might have necessitated their disbelief. Not until they free themselves and disavow themselves from that which they said or held before, then the shahada will not benefit them. Because the mujib meaning that which has necessitated their disbelief is still there. It hasn't been renounced. It hasn't been disavowed. It is still there. So that's an important point to understand, the distinction between the kafir asli, the kafir murtad, and who is it that benefits from the shahadatan. Is it the kafir asli or the kafir murtad? It's the kafir asli, the one who hasn't entered into Islam to begin with. And as for the kafir murtad, then he must free himself from the mujib, meaning that which necessitated his kufr, his disbelief. So that's the second issue. This is what we mean by Nawaqidul Islam. Anything, statement, belief, action that exits a person from the millah of Islam to the millah of kufr. After this, the Shaykh goes on to move into the third issue, still discussing the opening statement in the treatise. Shaykh al-Islam said, Ashara. He said 10. There are 10. So this raises the issue now, as the scholars say, that whoever looks, when you go back and you look into the books of fiqh, the books of jurisprudence in which they discuss the issue of the ruling on the apostate, then you see that there are many, many more nullifiers than just 10. And some of them, when you look in some of the earlier books, especially of the Hanafis, you see that they go to great lengths and great details in highlighting things which some of them, which are not really from the nullifiers, but you see some degree of exaggeration. And so they reach them up to 400 or, in excess. A very, very large number of things that would expel a person from Islam. So why is there 10? Why did the Shaykh mention 10? And so the scholars, they have numerous explanations behind this. And so the Shaykh mentions here two considerations. Either the Shaykh intended, firstly, he intended to show that these are the most dangerous. And these are the most frequently, the ones which the people most frequently fall into, these specific 10 that he mentions. So this is the first reason, or first angle, with which it can be explained why he limited them to 10 or why he mentioned only 10. The second explanation, or the second reason given, that perhaps the Shaykh intended to give examples rather than be exhaustive, rather than to list everything. So he merely intended to say 10 to illustrate as a representative sample, rather than to say there are only 10. There are only 10. And this, the Shaykh says, this is something that we find is something that is from the Uslub Arabi. This is from, so you see within the Arabic language that sometimes a number is mentioned, but it's not intended to mean the number itself, but rather just that this number is a sample, an example of all of the other instances. And so what is intended is al-mithal lal-hasar. Al-mithal meaning just to exemplify rather than to give al-hasar. Al-hasar is to be comprehensive, to list everything. And this is a mannerism that you find embedded within the Arabic language in the use of numbers. Now you see that, of course, in the prophetic traditions, in the hadith of the Messenger of Allah, where you see a certain number of things are mentioned. For example, the signs of hypocrisy, or there might be certain traits and qualities which if a person possesses, he will enter paradise. That does not mean to say that there are not other traits and qualities which also enter a person into paradise. So this is something that you see in the Arabic language. This is the second explanation that the Shaykh gives, and there are also some scholars mention others, and they say, for example, that the 10 that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab Rahimahullah mentioned are those which are unanimously agreed upon amongst all schools of thought, meaning that there is no difference between anyone about these 10 affairs, that they are from the nullifies of Islam. And this is a good explanation, it's a good point as well, because one of the shubuhat, one of the doubts which are spread against the da'wah of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab Rahimahullah is that it is a da'wah of takfir, of expelling Muslims from Islam. And this is far, far from the truth and far from the reality. Rather, when we compare what the Shaykh has listed in this treatise of the 10 affairs, which is Shirk, and the wasila, which involves a Shirk, and the other affairs that he continued to mention, we see that he has restricted the affairs on account of which takfir is made of the people to only those which are unanimously agreed upon. When you compare that and you go back and you look into the books of fiqh, the books of the Hanafis especially, and some of the other jurists, you find that there's they mention hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things which expel a person from Islam, and some of them are really, really so trivial and so small, and some of them are exaggerated that you can make takfir of a person very, very easily. And so what the Shaykh has done, he has restricted that only to the affairs which are unanimously agreed upon. So that's a third point that can be mentioned as well. And then the other issue as well, of course, is that the Shaykh Rahimahullah never made takfir of the common people. Rather, he educated the common people and taught them about Tawheed. And when the scholars who were embedded upon their Shirk, they were entrenched in their Shirk, when they saw that the people are turning to Tawheed, they then began to tell lies to the authorities, and they tried to instigate the authorities against Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab. And they began to say that he is declaring the ummah to be misguided, he's expelling the people from Islam, he's this, he's that, he's this, whatever. And then so those people then mobilized themselves to go and fight against the Shaykh. And as the Shaykh mentions in his Rasail, that he never ever ever initiated fighting against anyone except out of self-defense. Except out of self-defense. And the only thing he did was to teach the common person, the average person, don't call upon so-and-so Shaykh, don't call upon so-and-so person, call only upon Allah, rely upon Allah, make dua to Allah, worship Allah. That's all he told the common people. And on account of that, enmity was shown to him, and armies were mobilized against him, and all he did was to fight in self-defense. So that is point 3, Ashara, that the Nawaqid of Islam are 10 in number. Then we move on to the first that Shaykh al-Islam mentions, which is the issue of Shirk itself. And so the first of them was Ash-Shirku fi ibadatillah, Ash-Shirk in the worship of Allah. And then the Shaykh goes on to mention 2 ayat in the Quran, and after that he gives an example of what enters into major shirk, which is al-dhabh, which is sacrificing to other than Allah, like the one who sacrifices to a jinn or a wali, for example, and what is similar to that, to a qabr, to a grave. So the Shaykh will now discuss this for the rest of his commentary on this Nawaqid. So we start by saying that regarding this then, there are a number of issues, there are a number of masail issues to be discussed under this. First of all, what is the meaning of shirk in the Arabic language? When we say shirk, what does it mean linguistically speaking? And linguistically speaking, it means at-taswiyah. At-taswiyah. At-taswiyah, this means to make two things equal, to equate between two things. And in fact, this word, at-taswiyah, or the root, the verb, sawwa, yusawwi, this is mentioned in the Quran when Allah Azza wa Jal, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, when the people of hellfire will debate and argue and dispute with each other, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Tallahi, quoting them, citing them, Tallahi, in kunna lafi dhalalin mubin, idh nusawwikum bi rabbil alameen. They will say, indeed, by Allah, we were indeed in clear misguidance when we used to equate you, make you equal with the Lord of the worlds. So this now is the people of the hellfire. They are now addressing the gods that they used to worship, the deities that they used to worship. And they will acknowledge and say that indeed, by Allah, we were indeed in manifest misguidance when we equated you with the Lord of the worlds. Surah Shu'ara, Surah 26, verses 97 to 98. So, now this taswiyah, what is it in relation to? Well, we know it's in relation to Allah's rububiyyah, Allah's uluhiyyah, or His asma'i wa sifat. Either in terms of His rububiyyah, His lordship, or His right to be worshipped, or in His names and His attributes. However, we see that here the Shaykh, Rahimahullah, when he mentioned shirk, he said, "Ash-shirku fi ibadatillah." He mentioned only ibadah, which is uluhiyyah, because this is the common thing that is what most of the people would know and understand. Shirk in ibadah. As for rububiyyah, al-asma'i wa sifat, these are terms and definitions that the scholars, they spoke of after a comprehensive analysis of the Quran and the Sunnah, that the whole of Tawheed is encompassed in these three types. However, the common person, the average person, will not be familiar and will not know these technical definitions. And so the Shaykh, when he expressed this, ash-shirku fil ibadah, he used words and terms that the common person can relate to, the common person can understand. And so again, this is obviously indicates to us as well the wisdom in da'wah and addressing people with words and terms that are sufficient for them to acquire the understanding and the intent. So he said ash-shirku fil ibadah, and then he began to bring a number of evidences from the Quran. So we're going to look at these ayat in the Quran, and the Shaykh is going to derive some benefits from these ayat. So the first ayah the Shaykh immediately cites after mentioning this naqid of ash-shirku fi ibadatillah is the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, or the part of the ayah, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. Indeed, Allah does not forgive that shirk, that partners are associated with Him in worship, but He forgives what is less than that to whomever He wills. And so this we find in Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4, in two places in Surah An-Nisa. I believe it is verse 48 and 112, if I'm not mistaken. The references are mentioned. And in these two places where this particular wording is found in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, we find that there are two different endings. So for example, in verse 48, so verse 48 is one of them, the ending is, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اِفْتَرَى إِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. Whoever commits shirk with Allah, he has fabricated a mighty lie, a mighty fabrication, a mighty lie. And in the second place in which it occurs in that same surah, which is actually verse 116, there's a different ending. In that verse it says, وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا بَعِيدًا. Whoever commits shirk with Allah, then he has indeed gone far, far astray. He's become far, far astray. So, from these two verses, which mention the same wording first of all, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرَ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. That indeed Allah does not forgive that partners are associated with Him, but He forgives what is less than that to whomever He wills. There are two different endings. And from that we derive, from this ayah, number one, that any mushrik, the mushrik who associates partners with Allah, he is a muftarin. He is a fabricator. He is a fabricator in the sense that the deity which he has erected and made a rival to Allah or a partner to Allah or an equal to Allah, this is a fabrication of his mind. He's fabricated this. And there is no truth at all in his fabrication. It is baseless. It is a lie. It is false. It is futile. There is no basis for it at all. And secondly, in doing so, this individual is a dhal mudil. He is astray and he leads others astray. And he is far, far astray from the truth because he does not have any evidences, he does not have any barahin, proofs, evidences for what he's done, which means he is clearly upon misguidance. So he's a fabricator, a liar, with a mighty fabrication, and he is dhal mudil. He is one who is astray and who leads others astray. So the verse then that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab, rahimahullah, it indicates to us, first of all, that Allah Azza wa Jal does not forgive the one who dies upon shirk. This is the meaning of this ayah. The one who dies upon shirk, Allah Azza wa Jal does not forgive that individual. And now there is an issue which is raised, which is this lack of forgiveness for the one who dies upon shirk. Is this general for all types of shirk? Is it for shirk al-akbar, and a shirk al-asghar as well, for the minor shirk as well? Or is it only for the major shirk? And so this now is an issue that needs to be discussed. And the Shaykh then goes on to discuss this issue. And he says that the thing which is agreed upon by everybody, by all of the scholars and the leading scholars of this blessed, upright religion, is that anyone who dies upon major shirk, anything which is a shirk al-akbar, then this person will never be forgiven. He is khalidun mukhalladun fi nar, he is eternally in the fire. And this means that the differing is not in relation to a shirk al-akbar, or rather it is in relation to a shirk al-asghar. The scholars differ. Is a shirk al-asghar something that can be forgiven like all of the other major sins, or is it something that will not be forgiven? And so this is where we see that the scholars have a difference regarding this issue. Now, before we look at the different views on this issue, let's just clarify what is major shirk and what is minor shirk. What are the definitions and what are they, before we come back to the clarification on this issue. So a shirk al-akbar is هو صرف ما ثبت لله من حقوق لغيره من خلقه. It is basically to direct whatever is established to be from the rights of Allah, whatever is from the rights of Allah, to direct that to other than Him from His creation. This is major shirk, right? To direct anything which is from His rights to other than Him from His creation. So from His rights, we know that from His rights is ad-du'a, supplication, al-isti'ana, seeking aid, al-isti'adha, seeking rescue, at-tawakkul, relying upon Him, and all of the other various forms and types of worship that we see are mentioned in the Quran. All of those are from His unique sole rights. To take any of them and to direct them and to perform them for other than Allah. This now is the major shirk. As for al-shirk al-asghar, the minor shirk, then this refers to certain intentions, iradat, certain niyat which are intentions which arise in a person, certain iradat, like certain desires or wishes that pass through his heart, certain statements that he makes, that a person makes, and these iradat, niyat, aqwal, statements, they are avenues to major shirk. They are not major shirk in and of themselves, but they are avenues that will lead to major shirk. They are means, wasa'il, ila shirk al-akbar, ways and means that lead to shirk al-akbar. So, for example, a person might, in terms of niyat, a person intends the pleasure of other than Allah in his deed. A person does an action for other than Allah in his deed. He seeks recognition or praise. This in itself is not major shirk. It's not major shirk. It is ar-riya. But it is a wasila to what eventually becomes major shirk. Like what is found with the hypocrites, the munafiqeen. Because all of their deeds, or the vast majority of their deeds, are done for show and done for the sake of the people. And this is major shirk. It is major disbelief when all or the majority of a person's deeds are basically for show and for recognition, and so on and so forth. So here now, to do an action for other than Allah, to have a niyyah which is an insincere niyyah, this now is minor shirk, and it is a wasila to major shirk. Another example is swearing by other than Allah, and the scholars divide this into two types. One type is where you swear by other than Allah, but it's habitual, and by that you don't intend to venerate the thing or the being that you are swearing by. It's just something habitual. By so-and-so, by so-and-so. The people say it, so you say it. Just like habitual. But you don't intend necessarily that you are venerating the one whom you are swearing by. Right? So, when a person falls into this is minor shirk. And it can be a wasila to major shirk. And similarly, when a person in his speech, he says, whatever Allah willed and whatever you willed. Or when a person says, for example, if it hadn't been for the dog in the backyard, then the thief would have come, or the thief would have escaped. This is an example of minor shirk as well, because ultimately it was because of Allah's qadar, qada wal qadar, because Allah willed that situation. And so even though this wording technically is partly correct because it's true had it not been for the dog, but it eliminates, it ignores and removes the qada and the qadr of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so from that angle it becomes a wasila, or a means towards what can eventually become major shirk. So this is what we mean by minor shirk. It refers to like desires or wants or wishes that arise in a person's heart, or niyat, types of intentions which are insincere, or statements which are made in which there is ambiguity, or where you eliminate some aspect of Allah's mashi'ah, Allah's qudra, things of that nature, and you ascribe them only to the creation, right? All of these now become ways and means to major shirk. But they in and of themselves are not major shirk. So that's the difference between major shirk and minor shirk, and there are obviously difference in terms of the consequences as well. So from the consequences is that al-akbar, al-shirk al-akbar, expels from the fold of Islam, whereas minor shirk does not. That's one difference. The second difference is al-akbar, it necessitates al-khulud fi an-nar, eternity in the hellfire. Whereas al-asghar, al-shirk al-asghar, is not like that. It does not necessitate eternity in the hellfire. So these are two differences between al-akbar and al-asghar after we have understood the actual difference between the two in terms of what they actually are. What they actually are. So now we return back to our question. Our question was, if a person falls into minor shirk, ash-shirkul asghar, is this sin under the will of Allah? Is it under the mashi'ah? Or is it under the threat of Allah? Is it under al-wa'id? Do you understand? Because the question we are raising here is it a sin that Allah will forgive like all other major sins? We know that all of the major sins, such as gambling, fornication, adultery, stealing, lying, and all these other types of major sins, we know that these things can be forgiven, even if a person has not made tawbah. If you die upon these sins without any tawbah, then the affair is under Allah's will. This is what we mean. It is under the mashi'ah. Under the mashi'ah. It means it is under Allah's will. If Allah wills to forgive this person who comes on Yawm al-Qiyamah with sins of lying, cheating, and all these sins which he hasn't made tawbah from, if Allah wills, He will forgive him. And if Allah wills, He will punish him. So punishment is not certain. It comes back down to the will of Allah. Is it like this? Or is it something that comes under the threat, the wa'id of Allah, in which Allah will fulfill His threat of punishment? And this question, then the Shaykh says that there are two views regarding this, and both views have a salaf, both views have a basis in the views of the salaf. And so one group has said that ash-shirkul asghar will not be forgiven. It is unlike the other major sins. Rather, it is worse than the major sins, like stealing, cheating, fornicating, drinking, gambling. It is worse than all of that, and it is not forgiven. And the angle of proof is that the verse in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Indeed, Allah does not forgive that partners should be set up with Him. So here in this ayah, the word an, the particle an yushraka bihi, then the meaning is that Allah does not forgive that shirk is associated with Him at all. This means any type of shirk. This is this is general. And the asl is that we leave it upon its generality until there is something, another text, which comes and specifies that generality. So these scholars say this was left general. And they say ash-shirkul asghar can never ever be forgiven. So if you died upon that whilst having instances of minor shirk, like ar-riya and statements and so on and so forth, this will not be forgiven on Yawm al-Qiyamah.
These scholars don't have major shirk, minor shirk.
No, they do, of course they do. They still, they still have that.
Yeah.
Major shirk is something that will, if you die upon it, you are eternally in the hellfire. Minor shirk, you are not eternally in the hellfire, but you will definitely be punished for it.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Yeah. So the issue here is, will you be punished for it or not? Just like all the other major sins. The issue isn't like with ash-shirkul akbar, where you will be in hellfire for eternity. Yeah. Now the second group, they are of the view. The second group is of the view that ash-shirkul asghar is under the mashi'ah of Allah, is something that can be forgiven, and they bring specific evidences from the Sunnah with respect to this. So from them is that a man came and he said to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu Ma sha Allah wa shi't, whatever Allah willed and whatever you willed, and O Messenger of Allah. And so he said, Aj'altani lillahi adlan, have you made me an equal or a partner with Allah? Rather say Ma sha Allah wahdahu. And likewise, when a man came and he swore by his forefathers, and the Messenger of Allah he said, Ala inna Allah yanhaakum an tahlifu bi abaikum, faman kana halifan falyahlif billah wa illa falyasmut. Indeed, Allah has forbidden you from swearing by your forefathers. So whoever is going to swear, then let him swear by Allah, otherwise let him remain silent. And likewise, a man who swore, the Messenger of Allah, he said, "Man halafa faqala fi halifihi wallati wal uzza falyaqul la ilaha illallah." The one who swore and swore by Allat wal Uzza, meaning these deities, pagan deities of the Arabs, then let him say la ilaha illallah. So here he simply ordered the person to negate his shirk by affirming the shahada. So these types of texts, they indicate that a person, the Messenger of Allah, he corrected those people and taught them that which is correct and what they ought to do. So therefore, in light of these texts, a person is under the Mashi'a of Allah. He can be forgiven. He can be forgiven under the will of Allah. So the point being that both of these views have a basis in what has been held by the Salaf, and so therefore there's no one can find fault with the other person for whichever of the two views he or she holds. So this is the first thing. And from the ayah, the second thing from the ayah is that Allah Azza wa Jal has promised in this ayah that anyone who is not a mushrik, anyone who does not die upon shirk and nor upon kufr, Allah has promised that person with maghfirah, with forgiveness. Because He said, وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. He forgives to whomever He wills, which is less than that, to whomever He wills. So meaning whatever is less than shirk and kufr, that person has been given the promise of forgiveness. And this of course is in relation to the people of the kaba'ir, the major sins, like az-zina, fornication, saraqa, stealing, sharbul khamar, drinking wine, intoxicants, cutting off ties with the parents, cutting off ties with the close relatives, the womb, the blood relatives, and all of that. These are from the major sins. And the scholars give a definition of what is a major sin. They say a major sin is every sin for which a threat has been issued in the hereafter. A threat has been issued in the hereafter. That is a major sin for which there is a threat. Like for example, those people who slander and things of that nature, they will have scissors or fire that will cut their lips, things like that. This now indicates, is a proof that that action is a major sin. So this is the first category. Anything for which there is a threat of punishment in the hereafter. Secondly, any action for which a person is cursed in any of the texts. If there is a curse upon a person on account of an action, that action then is a major sin. Or if it is mentioned in the text that Allah is angry with someone on account of a particular action, the ghadab of Allah Azza wa Jal is mentioned, then that also enters into a major sin. Or if there is a had, a prescribed punishment in this world, then that is also a major sin. Right? So anything which falls into these four categories, that is a major sin. And everything else, anything that does not fall into these four, then it is from the minor sins. It is from the sagha'ir, from the minor sins. And so as we know in the text, anyone who avoids the kaba'ir, anyone who avoids the major sins, then his sagha'ir, the minor sins, will be forgiven. So anyone who performs his obligations whilst keeping away from all of the kaba'ir, then his minor sins will be erased. They will be erased and they will be forgiven. So all of this then should make it clear to us then that in relation to a shirk, in relation to this ayah, we have a shirkul akbar, person who dies upon it will never be forgiven. A shirkul asghar, the scholars differ. Some say it is worse than a major sin and cannot be forgiven. Even though a person will not remain in hellfire for eternity, he will still be punished and he will not be forgiven for his instances of minor shirk. And other scholars say that no, he will be forgiven because the evidence suggests and indicates that. And it is treated like all of the other major sins. It is under the will of Allah, under the Mashi'a of Allah. And then the ayah also indicates that anyone who falls into major sin, who commits major sins, Allah forgives all of those sins to whomever He wills. And so that person is under the Mashi'ah, and he will be forgiven if Allah Azza wa Jal wills. Meaning the one who comes to Him without having repented from anything, from any of the major sins. As for the one who makes tawbah in the life of this world, and he's sincere in this tawbah, and he makes istighfar, then his sinful deeds are erased, and the one who makes tawbah from a sin is like the one who has no sin. As long as that tawbah is genuine, sincere, and a person isn't playing games in his tawbah, right? Committing a sin, returning to it, seeking forgiveness, returning to it, and then, just playing a game basically. So as long as it is sincere and truthful, then that person's sin will be erased. So this, the Shaykh says, is the belief of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Anyone who meets Allah having committed a major sin, having persisted upon that major sin even without having made tawbah, then Allah, He will eventually be forgiven as long as he dies upon Tawheed, and he will eventually enter into paradise. The Messenger of Allah said, "Man laqiya Allah la yushriku bihi shay'an dakhala al-Jannah, wa man laqiyahu yushriku bihi dakhala an-nar." The one who meets Allah without having associated any partners with Him will enter paradise, and the one who meets Him having associate partners, then he will enter into the hellfire, related by Imam Muslim. And Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentions Babu dalil ala man mata ala tawheed dakhala al-jannata qat'an. Chapter, evidence that the one who dies upon Tawheed will enter into paradise absolutely. And the one who actually dies upon Tawheed, eventually he will absolutely enter into paradise. Even if he is punished first, he will eventually enter into paradise. So, from all of this, we can conclude then and just come to a close from what we've discussed so far, is that the people of the Sunnah are the furthest away from making takfir of people. And this is because they have a correct and sound understanding of these issues. They have a clear understanding of what is Tawheed, what is Shirk, what is Kufr, what is major Shirk, what is minor Shirk. They have conditions before they make takfir of an individual. There are barriers which they must remove before takfir of an individual. And all of these are derived from the texts. And this indicates that they are the furthest of people away from making takfir of anybody and everybody, of the general folk. They're not like this. Rather, they are the greatest of people in protecting and preserving the blood, the wealth, and the honor of the Muslims. And that's by virtue of the correct and sound usul, foundations, that they operate upon, and they ensure that they do not declare anyone to be a disbeliever except the one whom Allah and His Messenger have declared to be a disbeliever. So this is unlike the Khawarij and the Takfiris and other than them, and these types of shayateen, which are present today, who are unjust and make takfir of the people upon what does not warrant or necessitate takfir. Secondly, that the people of the Sunnah are the most knowledgeable of the people with respect to the truth, and they are most merciful of people to the people. This is a statement you see that is said by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, that Ahlul Sunnah a'lamun nas or a'rafun nas bil haqq wa arhamun nas lil khalq. That they are the most knowledgeable of all the people of the truth, and they are also the most merciful of people towards the creation. And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentions this numerous times, and others have said the same thing as well. So all of these qualities that you see that Shaykh has mentioned, that we are far from making takfir of people, we are the most knowledgeable of people of the truth, and the most kind and merciful of the creation to the creation, all of these are traits and qualities of Ahlul Sunnah which arise because of their correct understanding of the religion, their correct understanding of the usul of the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is a discussion of the first ayah that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad bin Abdul-Wahhab rahimahullah mentioned. We'll conclude at this point, and inshallah ta'ala we'll continue with the remainder in the next lesson. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.